They'd got married when she was 14 or 15 and gone up to the north woods of Minnesota, way out alone up there, and she got shack-wacky. That's why they came back here. She had some kind of nervous breakdown or something from being alone. Not that she was the only one. It happened to an awful lot of women. Governor Schofield will take steps to provide, if necessary, for the care of Mary Sweeney, who has caused so much trouble by smashing plate glass windows. This woman once taught school in Marquette, Michigan, and Stevens Point in this state. Mary says she doesn't know why she breaks windows, and only does it when the craze seizes her. She uses cocaine liberally on such occasions, saying it quiets her nerves. A woman who gave her name as Wilson died at Chippewa Falls from a criminal operation performed upon herself. Her parents lived near Eau Claire. Her brother took charge of her remains. The woman was young and pretty, and visited every physician in Chippewa Falls to accomplish her object, but without success. Lydia Berger, a 15-year-old girl, is in jail having confessed to the crime of arson. Several days ago, she left her home on a farm north of Milwaukee and went to town to go to the carnival. She was out late that night, and the next day her father whipped her for staying away without his permission. She sought revenge by setting fire to the little cottage in which they lived. It was burned to the ground. A neighbor gave the family shelter, and the next day, the girl set fire to the house of their benefactor. The girl says she set fire to the places simply to have revenge on her father for whipping her. Hey, it's Andrew with the Isle of Misfit Books, where I share with you the books that have struck me and stuck with me in my 25 years of working in rare books. And today we are going to be taking a look at Michael Lesy's classic of the American Gothic, the pioneering and controversial Wisconsin Death Trip. There was a dramatic scene in the courtroom at Oshkosh Saturday morning when Judge Burnell pronounced sentence upon T.C. Shove, the Manitowoc banker who was convicted of receiving deposits when he knew the bank was insolvent. The climax came when Mr. Shove drew forth a knife and tried to plunge the blade into his side, but was prevented by friends. In the town of Black River Falls, Wisconsin, there was discovered a trove of 30,000 glass negatives that were taken between the years of 1890 and 1910 by the town's photographer Charles Van Schaik. The archivist who discovered these 30,000 photos selected about 3,000 of them as still in good enough condition and sort of representative of the type of photographs that the town photographer would take. So there are lots of pictures of people, families, houses, horses, babies. This was a time when diphtheria and other diseases often claimed lives. The epidemic, said by some to be diphtheria, that prevails at Grantsburg among the young people goes on without abatement. A large number of deaths have occurred. The schools have been closed. The epidemic has given such alarm that it is hard to induce the living to bury the dead. He came across these photographs and combined those with articles from the town newspaper, the Badger State Banner, from the same time period. Combined these into essentially a collage that purports to give a portrait of this small town Wisconsin life, essentially rural Wisconsin life at the turn of the century, and during what really was the Great Depression, before the Great Depression. The 1890s was a period of economic difficulty and social upheaval, all of which portrays a picture of life on the frontier, life in the North Woods, that is really quite Gothic and pretty dark and horrifying. William Ashe, a Beaver Dam man, is in jail as a result of very peculiar circumstances. Thursday, the barn of Andrew Willard of Beaver Dam was destroyed by fire, and there was unmistakable signs of incendiary origin. And on the afternoon of the same day, William Ashe, age about 29 years, made his appearance at the county jail and requested the sheriff to lock him up. He said he hoped the sheriff would prosecute him to the full extent of the law. He said he was distracted on account of being out of work for a long time, and on the impulse of the moment, committed the crime for the sole purpose of being sent to prison, where he would at last receive enough to eat. The revolutionary format of this brought it wide accolades at the time of its publication, but even at the time of its publication, there were some who spoke out against it as giving an overtly negative portrayal of small-town life. It's a fascinating way to give a historical glimpse into a very specific time, a very specific place, while at the same time understanding that it is heavy-handed and its Gothicism its darkness is being emphasized.
Waunakee was raided by tramps the other evening, and nearly every business house and many residences were burglarized. The occupants of dwelling houses in many instances were driven into the street at points of revolvers, while other members of the gang ransacked the buildings.
Lesy states in the introduction, in quotes, "None of these accounts are fictitious." While that's true, they are highly edited and juxtaposed in a way that makes them quite sensational. The newspapermen, it was a father and his son, Frank and George Cooper. They were angling for eyeballs and readers in the same way that newspapers and news television programs and now social media always have. It's to bring in readers, bring in viewers, to sell ads to advertisers. That's the business model.
Charles Barker's place near Eau Claire, one of the most notorious pinery dens in that section, was burned at 4 o'clock the other morning. It was supposed it was set on fire by inhabitants of the neighborhood. The occupants, 10 women, barely escaped.
It's also important to remember that none of these were snapshots. The technology was bulky. Even in broad daylight, you needed at least half a second to be able to make an image, which would cause the photographer to instruct his subjects to stay stock still, and especially if they were photographing indoors with artificial light or on a dim day, the subjects would have to stand stock still, and I believe that's why so few of them were smiling, because a smile is harder to hold for a length of time. So often, they seem very grim, awkwardly frozen or rigid, but that's what they were being instructed to do. It, of course, comes across to us as somewhat strange, and then when he enlarges some of the slightly out of focus images and faces, this is kind of a standard horror trope now, that blurriness, as though the inability of the camera to really focus tightly is almost like the vampire not being able to see his reflection in the mirror. It almost seems to say that there's something about this person, their character, that refused to let the camera really focus on them. But it really is just a glitch of the technology that Lesy kind of exploits here to make some of these subjects look a little strange. And of course, it doesn't help that their facial hair or their strange hat lines making their faces very dark while their heads are very light. There are certainly some strangenesses in these photographs, and that's what makes them great. That's why I think this book is so fabulous, is that you do have real glimpses from that time period and from that place. You just have to understand that they have been manipulated to look even more strange than they actually are. And really, this is what so many documentaries do. They shape, they color, they distort, all in the service of telling the story that they want to tell. Lesy is on record as saying he really wanted to make a movie, but was unable to, so he produced this book. In the 90s, James Marsh made a movie based on the book and using a lot of the same stills from the book. I think he incorporated more and then staged in a similar black and white style certain scenes from the book. Called Wisconsin Death Trip from the 90s. James Marsh is the director, and worth a look for sure.
Anna Morris, alias Frank Blunt, the woman who has tried to be a man for the last 15 years, was sentenced to the penitentiary for 1 year. She was arrested several months ago in Milwaukee, charged with stealing $175. It was then discovered that the prisoner was a woman, although she had worn masculine attire nearly all her life. Gertrude Field, a woman who claimed to have married the prisoner in Eau Claire, fell upon the neck of the prisoner and wept for half an hour. This woman has furnished all the money for Blunt's defense and now proposes to carry the case to the Supreme Court.
Another one of the knocks against Lesy is that he didn't sort of address the broader social circumstances that were happening at that time. But that wasn't his method. His method was to just give a cross-section from this place and that time. And I think the economics do come through as much as the strange and demented psychological effects of living in this place. The economic hardships really do come through in the number of incendiaries or arsons, basically, that people were committing on their own houses in order to collect insurance. A lot of incendiaries committed on rival businesses in order to drive competition away, and some incendiaries just out of boredom.
Anna Mianek, a 15-year-old Polish girl of the town of Burnside, was sent to a Milwaukee industrial school by County Judge Odell. She set fire to her employer's barn, burning it with 48 loads of hay, and also set fire to the house. The next morning, she set fire to 2 loads of hay and set fire to the house twice. She told the judge she had set the fires because she was lonesome and homesick and wanted excitement.
And in the number of self-killings that happen, clearly many of them are motivated by economics, as stated by the people that do the deed, as stated by the newspaper. Businesses failing, people losing work, people unable to feed themselves, their families, people going through the trauma of witnessing their children dying due to diphtheria and other diseases, and just going shack-wacky, is just a wonderful phrase, but a horrible experience. The loneliness, the solitude, the isolation, the alienation of living in this very hardscrabble place. The italics are Lesy's summaries of certain larger stories. There's a story of an opera singer who was trained in Europe, who came to New York to put on an opera that she had commissioned specially for herself to be the starring role. It didn't do well, so she sort of moved further west, trying to capture some of the glory from her earlier days, and wound up settling with her son in a house that was sold to her by a shyster. He goes into some larger stories, so it's not just these brief snippets. You will see certain characters recurring. There's one in particular, I think Mary Ricks or Mary Sweeney, who just has a thing for throwing rocks through windows. That's her thing. She really likes it. And you can imagine the business proprietors do not take too kindly to this. A big plate glass window, even now, that's an expensive thing to replace. And she just liked it. She just got a kick out of it. The Badger State Banner, at that time, there were no photographs. Van Schaik's photographs do not correspond at all, except through coincidence that we would be unaware of, with any of the newspaper excerpts. It's a history, it's a documentary, it's a photography book, it's a Gothic tale, it's a dark, depressing tale. It's as cold as a snowy winter in Wisconsin. It was not the American dream by any stretch. It was the American nightmare for many, certainly. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of it. If you did, if you got some value from it, got some entertainment from it, I'd appreciate you hitting the like button and subscribe, because I'm going to keep putting out this sort of book tour. You could click here if you want a similar tour. The best way to support the channel would be to check out one of my books. I will have links in the description box below. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next one.